So Bernie Sanders, he was definitely one of the bigger winners of the debate on Thursday night. He kind of just was his classic Bernie Sanders, coming up with a lot of good progressive ideas that people like myself and, I think a good portion of the country supports. But there was one particular issue that he did not shine on very well. And the response to this question, which, to be fair, was a very loaded question and a very badly framed question, which was no surprise considering majority of the questions from the ABC debate were terrible. The moderators were pretty shitty, like 80 to 90% of the time they were terrible. But Bernie Sanders was asked about the situation in Venezuela by Jorge Ramos. He was asking the questions that were specifically like catering to like Hispanic voters, Latino voters, and so he asked this question about Venezuela. And then I want you guys to listen to Bernie Sanders' response, and it was a very, very bad response. So let's listen to this, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Vamos a hablar de América Latina. You haven't been asked about Latin America in the previous debate, so let's begin. Senator Sanders, one country where many immigrants are arriving from is Venezuela. A recent UN fact-finding mission found that thousands have been disappeared, tortured, and killed by government forces in Venezuela. You admit that Venezuela does not have free elections, but still you refuse to call Nicolas Maduro un dictador, a dictator. Can you explain why, and what are the main differences between your kind of socialism and the one being imposed in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua?
Well, first of all, let me be very clear. Anybody who does what Maduro does is a vicious tyrant. What we need now is international and regional cooperation for free elections in Venezuela so that the people of that country can create their own future. In terms of democratic socialism, to equate what goes on in Venezuela with what I believe is extremely unfair. I'll tell you what I believe in terms of democratic socialism. I agree with what goes on in Canada and in Scandinavia, guaranteeing health care to all people as a human right. I believe that the United States should not be the only major country on earth not to provide paid family and medical leave. I believe that every worker in this country deserves a living wage and that we expand the trade union movement. I happen to believe also that what, to me, democratic socialism means is we deal with an issue we do not discuss enough, Jorge, not in the media and not in Congress. You got 3 people in America owning more wealth than the bottom half of this country. You got a handful of billionaires controlling what goes on in Wall Street, the insurance companies, and in the media. Maybe, just maybe, what we should be doing is creating an economy that works for all of us, not 1%. That's my understanding of democratic socialism.
All right, so obviously I don't disagree with what Bernie Sanders said. He's absolutely right about the fact that his idea of democratic socialism is not the same as just kind of the standard kind of concept of socialism that, people, we learned when we were, taking civics courses and government type courses, political science type courses. But, so I like to think that I like the fact that he's mentioning the policies that he supports kind of contrary to what the kind of scary socialism argument is, especially coming from right-wingers. So the way you answer that question, so it's fine. Like, listen, if you want to go out there and you want to have an opinion about Nicolas Maduro being a tyrant, dictator, whatever the fuck you want to say, that's your opinion. Bernie Sanders wants to say that. That's his opinion. I don't think it's to his benefit to say that, but I get why he's saying that. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as Tulsi Gabbard saying that Bashar al-Assad is a tyrant or dictator. So he's kind of taking the same approach as her, in the sense that he doesn't want to alienate regular voters out there who are going to who are going to say things, they're going to say things about these candidates, and they're going to be like, oh, this person is too radical, they're too far left. When it comes to talking about these issues, when it comes to talking about socialism and communism, I feel like you need to be sympathetic to the idea that people in certain countries support those ideas, and I'm sure Bernie is, but trying to go out there and talk about how I am nothing like, let's say, Nicolas Maduro, like, okay, we get it, Bernie, you're not like Nicolas Maduro, and I get that you don't want to, you don't want to, you don't want people like right-wingers and stuff to say that you are, a socialist and you're a communist and Marxist or whatever. And I get it. But at the same time, you could have easily answered that question by saying, listen, Nicolas Maduro was elected democratically elected, just like Bashar al-Assad, democratically elected by his people. He has supporters that do support his positions and what he does and the things that he wants to push for. Same thing with Bashar al-Assad, and obviously you can go out there and you can talk about how Bashar al-Assad is a dictator, and that's what Tulsi Gabbard says and stuff. Honestly, in a lot of cases, she was kind of pressured into saying that. It seems like it's the same case with Bernie Sanders and Maduro. Now, obviously, those are two different kind of candidates, but mainly Bashar al-Assad is an issue for Tulsi because she went and visited and met with Bashar al-Assad and I think his wife too, and so she's had to respond for that. Now, when it comes to Nicolas Maduro, I don't think it benefits Bernie to go out there and talk about what a tyrant and dictator Maduro is, and then try and differentiate his ideas from him as if, just to like, because what he's doing is he's trying to appease right-wingers and giving into the bait of what they want from him. They want him to go and address this issue and then, flub it, botch it, come up with something, they want to come up with like a clever soundbite that will make him look stupid. And luckily in this regard, he didn't end up looking stupid. I just didn't like his response. Instead of, kind of just saying, okay, he's a democratically elected president. Yes, I disagree with what he's doing to his people, but he does have supporters that love him, that support him in his country. But there should be some situations where, where obviously the United States, of all situations, the United States should not get involved in Venezuela, because right now, under the Trump administration, we're getting involved in Venezuela, and the neocons, and in many cases the neoliberals, are supporting it. And just like they're supporting going into Syria to bomb and overthrow Assad too, they want to do the same thing with Nicolas Maduro. So, Bernie could have easily responded to that by saying, okay, yes, I am a democratic socialist. I am not a socialist like Nicolas Maduro. Me and him and I, would have things some things we disagree on. The dictator tyrant thing I didn't really care for, obviously, but whatever. You can say that too, because maybe he's done some things that are dictatorial and tyrannical. But at the same time, he could have also said that this, so Venezuela, in this regard, Venezuela is being used as a boogeyman, Maduro specifically and Venezuela are being used as boogeymans and as examples for the United States to find another country to invade, bomb, and, overthrow and make into one of our puppet governments, which is pretty much what we've done with Iraq, and we've done with, we've done it with, not really Yemen, and obviously not Syria either. Yemen, we're just bombing the fuck out of right now. But it's just, you don't want to add it to another list of those countries that we're bombing the shit out of and overthrowing and trying to make one into one of our puppet governments. And if Bernie would have added that to his answer, I would have liked his response a lot better. Instead of just saying that Maduro is a dictator and tyrant and I don't agree with his form of socialism. Like, you could have spun that way. You could have spun that response, you could have spun your answer to that question a hell of a lot better than that, because that was just like a subpar answer at best. I'm being nice, and that's probably because I have largely higher standards. Unlike somebody like Joe Biden, I have higher standards for Bernie Sanders, and I expect better from him. I can't let him give responses that are going to be subpar, because a subpar Bernie Sanders answer is, in my opinion, a bad answer. And that's why I'm covering it, and that's why I'm telling you guys that this is not a good response. And I'm sure many people would agree with me. Unfortunately, I think there's going to be a lot of people also out there that are Bernie Sanders supporters that are going to be like, whatever, who cares? It's not a big deal. It wasn't a good response, but they're not going to go out and like criticize him because they don't want to shit on Bernie. But you know what? I'm somebody that's coming out there, and I'm going to give you the reality and the truth and what I believe. And you guys need to understand that at the end of the day, left-wingers, or just anybody really on the left, shitting on left-wing so-called dictators, or even the likes of Bashar al-Assad to some extent, because he is more of a secular Shia leader, I don't think that's a benefit to the left. Because what ends up happening, it ends up boosting and legitimizing the right-wingers who want to go and, like I said before, overthrow these governments. So whether they want to overthrow Bashar al-Assad, whether they want to overthrow Nicolas Maduro, you're just adding credence to those people. Trust me, you want to add as little credence to no credence to those people when they make these ridiculous arguments and they say these things. And I don't think, I think Bernie is a little bit too paranoid about seeming as if he's pro Nicolas Maduro. And I don't know. I just don't believe that that's going to be the case, because I think I believe that his policies are going to ironically trump all of the other stupid things that people are going to be saying about him. So all the complaints that people are going to be making about how, he's a socialist, he's a Marxist, he's a communist. On the flip side, a lot of people are saying Donald Trump is like he's like Hitler, and he's like whatever dictator you want to throw out there. He's a terrible fascist, which he is a fascist. But they're calling him a Nazi and they're comparing him to Hitler and stuff. Like, that stuff only really, in my opinion, it only sympathizes with the most extreme of people, and honestly, it gives a reason for the people on the other side, in this case the right wingers, to say like, oh, okay, so now we're just going to start comparing dictators to our president, so then they're going to end up doing the same thing to Bernie Sanders, just like which they already do anyway. So what the hell is the point? My point is that you're not reaching any kind of resolution or conclusion when you're just starting to you're starting to compare people to the worst dictators out there. Just find like the worst dictator, Kim Jong-un, or what was it? Mao Zedong or something? I don't know. Some just like random dictators, Mussolini to Hitler, whatever. Just Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez. People like, you just throw out all these different, what they consider, what people consider dictators. I'm talking about Democrats consider dictators, and you attack them, and you end up shitting on the side of the political spectrum that honestly you shouldn't be doing it. And I just think it's a major misstep for Bernie Sanders. And I think in my opinion, as long as he focuses on the policies, progressive, social democratic policies, the same ones that he mentioned in that response, as long as he focuses on that, he doesn't need to worry. And when it comes to responding to questions regarding Nicolas Maduro, just go out there and say, listen, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. He's a dictator. I don't agree with that, but he can say that. I understand he has to take that position, but he has to also say, listen, there's people in Venezuela, because there is, and if you ask people like Abby Martin, who's a great reporter, I think, was it Max Blumenthal? I think it was Max Blumenthal. That was another person. There was a couple of there was multiple left wingers, but Abby Martin was one of the main ones. Who's the other one? I'll remember it in a second. If not, I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can kind of check him out. But there's multiple left-wing, commentators and journalists out there that have went to Venezuela and spoken to Venezuelan citizens and asked them about their opinions on Maduro. And they love him and they like him. They support what he's doing, even if he's not like the perfect leader. Yeah, he's doing things that are dictatorial and tyrannical, but they still support his policies because he's a socialist left-wing politician. He's a socialist left-wing president, and they support him on those things. So my point is that you have to try and look at these kind of characterizations of these leaders in different countries in a more fair manner, and especially when it comes to Democrats criticizing those left-wing politicians in those countries, they have to be smarter in how they address those people. And in my opinion, you're much better off if you're Bernie Sanders to admit the fact that Maduro was democratically elected. Yes, he's a tyrannical whatever dictator, whatever, but he was democratically elected. He has supporters out there. He is a socialist. He pushes for ideas that that I'm pushing for example, health, single payer healthcare for all, universal childcare, universal education, et cetera, et cetera. Now when it comes to other economic issues like, obviously like, wages and stuff, I'm sure those, kind of dictator type countries are they're obviously not very good, because that's kind of always been an issue with, obviously with any kind of dictatorship. They treat their people like slaves essentially. So yeah, and so that's fine. Those are I think that's the best way to answer it. And the criticisms like that, like I mentioned, are perfectly fine criticisms to make, but you also have to couple it with giving credit to them for pushing for left-wing ideas that a good portion of people on the left support, and Bernie Sanders represents the left. And I think he would be much better off answering it in that kind of way.